Dr. Haley, thank you so much for joining the podcast again. We have your first episode coming up next Monday on iTunes and Spotify and other listening platforms. Really interesting story. Really great that you got. We talked about drinking aloe vera, superfoods, gut health, a lot of good stuff that the people need to hear about, and you're very passionate about it. So I love having you on the podcast. And today we're going to jump into the truth about processed foods, farming, and where our food is really coming from. So, Dr. Haley, thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Dr. Kevin. It's so good to be here. And, it's really interesting because as you talk about that, the truth about farming, these are things that you would assume everybody would know, but I didn't know them until I became a farmer. I actually this aloe company kind of got dropped in my lap. And the first thing I did is I said, oh, wow, I got to learn something about this. So I went out to the farm with my video camera and started filming things. And I couldn't believe what I learned about farming and aloe vera specifically, but I know it crosses over to everything, whether it's, oranges or bananas or your vegetables, things happen on the farm and in the processing plant, and it tremendously affects the food we are buying in the stores. We talked a little bit about GMOs last time, right?
Yes, yeah.
I think it's important that people understand what that is because, and this is not going to be about GMOs, but, if you are buying conventional foods, that will apply. People don't really realize that GMO means more chemicals. We talked about pesticides, herbicides, and things like that are incorporated into GMOs.
Just to reiterate, what is a GMO, Doc?
Yeah, well, it's funny, genetically modified organism. A lot of people think that it means that, we got somehow bigger, better vegetables, and now we're able to feed more people because we've modified them through maybe selection. No, not at all. That's not the case. I always like to refer back to corn, which is the flagship GMO, the genetically modified organism. The government got behind it and, sponsored this big, feed the world, right, with GMO corn. And we can make more corn in less space now. But the question is how do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
When you're a farmer, you do that by getting rid of competition. What do I mean by that? Competition is things that compete for the nutrients that are supposed to go into the food that we're growing. So if I had weeds growing, those weeds are, sucking nutrients from the soil, taking them away from the vegetables. If I have bugs, they're, eating the vegetation
produce,
that we're trying to grow. So, things that get into the food that eat it as we're trying to farm it. And that's competition. So get rid of all the weeds, get rid of all the bugs. Now I can grow more corn. In this case, we're going to use corn in less space. It's not bigger, better, healthier corn. It's more because there's less competition. So how do we get rid of the competition? And the perfect example, people have heard of Monsanto and, how evil Monsanto is. Why is that? Because Monsanto is the company that we buy our Roundup from. I don't buy Roundup. I hope our listeners don't buy Roundup. But what is Roundup? If you spray it on something green, it dies. But not everything.
Yeah.
Not everything dies. So, Monsanto, the ones that make the chemical that people spray in their gardens to kill weeds, studying these things, found a gene in a weed that wouldn't get killed from their Roundup. And in their wisdom, if we could somehow inject that gene into the corn, making it Roundup ready. What do we mean Roundup ready? Well, imagine if the farmers could spray the cornfields with Roundup to kill all the competition, to kill all the weeds. Now we can grow more corn. So Roundup ready corn means it can take chemicals, Roundup, and we're spraying this stuff on it that is designed to do what? Kill. We're spraying a chemical on the food that's designed to kill. That's Roundup ready. That's genetic modifications.
Right.
And in the same way, if we could somehow genetically modify the corn to handle the bug, the insect problem, wouldn't that be something? the corn, through genetic modifications, produces a sharp protein that essentially, when it's consumed by an insect, it explodes their guts, pokes it open, they die. Well, is that chemical, is that going to be good for us when we eat it?
No,
It might not explode my gut because it's thick. Mine's thicker than an insect, but I'm sure it's not good for it to be
definitely damaging our gut lining for sure.
Yeah. So this is genetic modifications, and the corn's rather useless as a food unless it's tremendously processed. But I'm wondering if it's GMO. I'm wondering if that's the reason why we're using high fructose corn syrup in sodas. Do you remember when there was a big change from like sugar to high fructose corn syrup? I'm not sure when that happened in like Coca-Cola and all the sodas, but I think what happened is they said, no, we got all this genetically modified corn that can't really be eaten unless it's processed. What are we going to do with it? Let's make high fructose corn syrup. Let's make cornstarch. Let's make, and now you look at packages. You can't go to the grocery store and, pick something off the shelf and look at the ingredients without seeing something related to corn in it.
Yeah.
Got to do something with the corn. So we got the GMO corn everywhere. That's the flagship. That's the example that GMO follows. That's what it's based on.
I have a question for you. So what do you say to the people that they say there's no really good research yet to state whether GMOs are actually bad for us? We don't know yet. There's no research that supports that. And it seems like there's some pretty heavy research and we know exactly what's going on with the food and that's not good, but there's still people out there flipping the coin saying, no, it's really not as bad as people say it is for you.
The problem with it is these things, it is true. They are difficult to research because we're looking at cumulative damage, meaning if I eat something GMO today, I'm probably not going to puke tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably not going to get sick today. It is very difficult to measure cumulative damages. Now, common sense, well, if we just appeal to common sense and put research aside for a minute, common sense tells you that your body can only handle so many chemicals. There's a point in time when essentially you're eventually our bodies filter wonderfully. They got, kidneys and a liver and things that kind of, continue to clean our blood, but they have their limits. It's kind of like, the recommended dietary intake of vitamins and minerals. We don't get enough vitamin C. We don't get enough vitamin D. We got things like scurvy. We got rickets. Those show up faster than lack of other nutrients, but we continue to realize over time, oh, wow, this is really doing damage. We really actually need these vitamins because when we don't have them, they cause these illnesses over time. And it took us many, many years to figure these things out. And every now and then we add another vitamin to the list of the vital nutrients, the nutrients that are vitamins, vital nutrients, important for us. Lack of causes health problems. In the same way, chemicals over time, it's just a matter of time before we really figure this out. You can step back and use common sense, and you can look at the people that eat conventional foods or fast foods and just compare them to the crazy people, right? The Fruit Loops that are out there, eating real food off the farm and growing their own food, right? And say, okay, which one of these people look healthier?
Right.
The guy that's, walking into the fast food restaurant, eating burgers and fries, or the person that's shopping at the green markets.
Right. Well, that documentary Super Size Me is a great example. Like the guy almost died. His blood, all his vitals and blood pressure were through the roof when that was done, just from eating fast food every day.
Yeah. So I really don't know what the research says. And to me, it's not even something that I'm interested in looking into, because why would I want to eat food that's not real, food that was made by man, and rather than the creator of the universe? So all the knowledge put into, and here comes man with this minute amount of knowledge, thinking in their brain, wow, if we can somehow have the food make chemicals or tolerate chemicals, wouldn't that be great? Are you kidding me?
Not really.
Where'd you get that idea? That's nuts. I'm going to stay with the original plan.
Yeah.
And search out real foods.
So Doc, what did you learn from, getting your hands dirty on the farm and actually making your own food and going to the plants and seeing how the food is actually made?
Yeah, well, the first thing we did is went out to the field and said, okay, how are these things harvested? And it's really interesting when you see, we grow in the Dominican Republic. And the differences there versus what we do here, for instance, getting rid of weeds in the United States, we might just spray the fields with, chemicals to kill the weeds. Over there, we actually use hose and rakes, and we dig up the weeds and we put them on top of the aloe plants to give them shade so they don't burn.
Yeah.
It's actually something that's useful for us. There's no chemicals involved in that process. The aloe vera doesn't need pesticides because it's natural. Plants have natural resistance to bugs, and especially aloe vera. That outer leaf is extremely bitter. That's the part that some people will actually use as for its laxative effect, which I think is the wrong choice to do, because you're using a chemical irritant, a phytochemical, plant chemical irritant, something that's meant to protect the inside of the plant from bugs. And we're using it as an irritant to loosen our bowels, which essentially your body says, well, that's not good for me. Let me get rid of it. And things loosen up and we expel it out the rear end. That's the laxative effect. I don't think that's the right part of the plant to consume. The inner gel that has all the gut healing, the immune benefits, I do believe that is. But out in the fields, we cut the leaves off with a knife. And, the first thing I noticed when I had taken over this operation was because we're not using chemicals, we're not pasteurizing, we're not cooking things, we need it perfectly clean. And we would do bacteria measurements and stuff. It's like, why are our counts so high? It's harmless bacteria, but why are they so high? And I realized that, the cut that was happening in the field, then we'd wash the leaves. We didn't get a new cut with a clean knife. So, okay, that has to happen. We'd finished the fillet process, and we were getting too much of the outer leaf aloe in there. So we realized that if we cut it and let it bleed out before, we finished all the cuts on both ends and let it drain, the aloe and the outer leaf sap would bleed out. Then we could finish the fillet, and we tremendously lowered our counts. Now, what happens in conventional farming, and what were they? What are all the other aloe companies doing? Or forget aloe, whatever your juice beverage is or whatever your processed, food is. What are they doing? They were filtering it. They are standardizing it. See, people want a standardized product. They want all the bottles of grape juice to look and taste the same. They want their cranberry juice to look and taste the same. They were filtering it. All the other companies are pretty much doing this. I shouldn't say all, but 99% of them. The aloe gel, after they fillet the leaves or use machines to grind them, if you're not so worried on the front end about a pure product, if you know you're going to filter it, you're less cautious. They dump all this stuff in a big mixing tank, homogenizing tank, and then it goes in big bags of diatomaceous earth and activated carbon. Now, we use carbon to filter water, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not very specific. It attaches onto a lot of things, not just the bad stuff that you want to get rid of, not the phytochemicals like the aloe that has the laxative effect. It's also going to be taking nutrients. Mm-hmm. So imagine having a 1,000-gallon tank and dumping in 50 pounds of diatomaceous earth and 50 pounds of carbon and stirring it up into this big slurry, then putting it through a pressure filter to, kind of take out these cakes of powder with all the things that attach to them. And what comes out is a much clearer liquid, a colorless liquid. Now, what is color in food?
That's the nutrients, right?
Right. Yeah. And, for some, it's the nutrients and what I'll call the anti-nutrients, like the outer leaf parts that you wouldn't want to consume. Mm-hmm. If I wanted to get rid of things the right way, I'd peel the oranges before processing the juice. in the same way, peel the aloe properly before processing the gel. Or we can just throw it all into a grinder and filter it to take out the nutrients and the anti-nutrients. So that process, they call it, in the case of aloe, they call it decolorization and deodorization. When you're taking out color and you're taking out aroma, you're taking out nutrients and anti-nutrients. What we do is we separate the anti-nutrients from the nutritious part, and then process that, grind it, and bottle it, and then freeze it. So we don't have to take out anything. And we realize that every batch is going to look and taste a little bit different because nature does that. Sometimes the oranges are brighter orange, and sometimes they're more pale, and based on the climate. That's farming. That's real farming. Your artisanal farms are going to create, every batch is going to be a little bit different. So let's continue the processing part now. Another thing that happens is pasteurization. What's that? We add a heat process to it. This is probably one of the biggest discoveries that I noticed in the processing of aloe vera juice. What's happening for all of the other brands? Most of the other brands. I'm sure there's some smaller company exceptions. Pasteurization, 170 degrees. And then what do you do with that hot liquid? You would think you would cool it down and then bottle it or pack it. No, you pack it first, because once you get it into the container, if it's in there at 170 degrees, we know that everything in there is going to be dead. Now, this is not me, but conventionally thinking, we're going to add some chemicals to it because it's going to cool down and things could still grow, and there might be some spores in there that can populate. So let's add some preservatives, and we're going to hot seal this in those big blue plastic drums. But don't worry, we'll have a BPA-free plastic liner in there.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. These things are being hot sealed at 170 degrees in plastic. What does heat do to plastic?
Melts it.
Yeah. Activates it, melts it. We're going to get plastic leaching now into, in this case, aloe or orange juice, grape juice, or whatever your juice is being pasteurized in a conventional farming atmosphere.
Is there anybody to regulate after it goes through these plastic bins, or once the company gets the approval to produce their product, it's a green light? Is there anybody all right, hold on, wait a minute, here's your batch, let's just look at this before it goes on market? Once they get the approval, they can just crank out as much as they want?
Yeah, this is all completely, standard acceptable practices where, now what happens, this raw material with preservatives in it is essentially being shipped to distributors in the United States, in this case of aloe. And we know it's the same with other juices and beverages. And, there's only a handful of farms producing oranges, producing grapes, producing, but there's a lot of juice companies selling these, orange juice, grape juice, and, cranberry juice, or whatever kind of juice it is. There's a lot of brands, a lot more brands than there are farms, because they're buying it in bulk, reprocessing, repackaging, and putting their own labels on it. So we have a company in the United States that's responsible for supplying most of the aloe companies. So one location that will source their aloe from whatever farms they get the good deal from at the time.
Right.
Each with their different processes, but for the most part, they're very similar, using the carbon and the diatomaceous earth and putting preservatives in it. 55-gallon drums, we sell now to other aloe companies that reprocess it, and they might say, well, let's flavor it, or let's repasteurize it, or let's not pasteurize it. Let's call it raw. Well, it's already been pasteurized. There's companies out there selling it as if it's raw, saying no heat process is used. Yeah, after you get the raw material, but it's already been cooked in the plastic, and you don't even know about that, do you?
And they can slap the organic label on it too, can't they?
Well, it's got to be organic from the original farm, and
So they can do whatever they
yes,
want after that, and it's still quote unquote organic,
uh,
mostly.
yes and no.
Okay.
The whole process has to be certified organic to it. Now, there's different certifying agencies. The USDA seems to be the one with the highest standard that we tend to listen to. Some people have USDA certifications, other have other organic certifications, and some are easier to get than others.
Would you say that's the best label to see, the USDA organic, while shopping in America?
Yeah, that's the standard. It doesn't mean it's the highest standard, and my product does not have the stamp on it. Why? Because, well, it's going to raise my prices. It's going to take me time. It's going to raise my prices. And quite frankly, my standards are much higher than the USDA's. They just are. They might not think so. They would think that pasteurization and preservatives are a good thing. I would look at it and say, yeah, well, if you're going to do those things, then you don't need to be as clean on the front end. You're going to do lots of filtering. You're going to damage the nutrients. I think being real clean on the front end and freezing it immediately is going to be a much healthier option, than cooking it and adding chemicals. But those things are allowed in the USDA certified organic. Absolutely. Adding chemicals that come from a laboratory still allowed in organic products. So I think my standard's a bit higher than that. And I'm not interested really at all in having that label. But some of my customers wish it was there. I don't know why you'd want to pay more money for our product.
Yeah.
for a lower standard than what we have. But if that's important to you, there's pretty much all, it's funny when it comes to aloe, pretty much all aloe really is organic when it comes to the USDA standards. It really is. It's all coming from one of a handful of farms, and some of the individual companies went through the process to get the stamp. Whoop-de-doo. Yeah. Aloe vera doesn't need pesticides because it's naturally resistant. It really doesn't need herbicides. It grows good even among the weeds, but it's grown in places like Mexico and Dominican Republic where they are chopping up the weeds and putting them on top and tenting the plants. So there's really nothing to that there's no reason why chemicals are needed in aloe vera farming. Well, here, interesting thing, once these aloe companies are purchasing these big drums, they are reprocessing it. Now, if they add their own set of preservatives, that's the preservatives you're going to see on the actual label when you purchase it. Not necessarily the preservatives that was put in from the original farmer making that raw material. Right. That's why there's still mercury in vaccines, because, you're not allowed to add mercury to the vaccine, but when they're sourcing the subcomponents, some of them are preserved in mercury components. But they don't have, that doesn't go on the label. It doesn't have to, even in the case of vaccines, well, that's an entirely different podcast. Yeah, this is common practice in manufacturing pretty much all things. I found this out the hard way early on when we made a variation of I just happen to have one here, an earlier version of this. Was that say acne cream? Well, yeah, it's an aloe vera. It's a very natural aloe vera cream. 70% of the aloe gel that you would drink in this product, and essentially emulsified in coconut oil with a few extra things like tremella mushroom and shea butter and lavender essential oil and manuka honey and those exquisite anti-aging ingredients. Well, our first version of this, we wanted to make it paraben free. So we made sure we didn't put, and then the lab fought us, no, you have to put parabens in to preserve it. Well, let's find a more natural preserving system. And, well, after we made it, we didn't add any parabens. We found out that some of the ingredients that we had ordered in had parabens in it. Now, legally, no parabens on the label. Didn't have to be, because they were in the ingredients that we were ordering in. We thought we were getting whole, real, natural ingredients. Now, when we remade it, not only did we not add parabens, but we made sure that all of our subcomponents were paraben free, so that it's truly paraben free. But a lot of our paraben free cosmetics actually have parabens in them.
Yeah.
It's a very messed up system that we have. Well, when you buy a bottle of juice and it has preservatives on the label, there might be other preservatives in it that aren't on the label because the original farmer added them to the mix. The juice companies might even put these in glass bottles on the shelf, and you might even pay a premium because they're in glass, because who would ever buy anything that's in plastic, right? Wait a second. It was 170 degrees in plastic before it was in the glass.
Yeah. It's the stuff you just don't even think about.
Well, yeah. Now, our aloe, not going to lie, it's in plastic.
Mm-hmm.
What's the big difference? It was put into the plastic while cold. The bottles were manufactured well before filling them. That means that the plastic had time to cure, gas off. See, plastics really gets its bad rap when it's hot in plastic, or when the plastic doesn't have a chance to gas off, such as, when you're bottled water. It takes up so much room in the grocery aisle, right? If you think about the water factory, do you think they have the storage space to make that many bottles and keep them on hand, giving them plenty of time to, gas off and fully cure before filling them? I've never been to a water factory, but I'm suspecting that they blow it and it probably moves around to a certain point and then gets filled and capped and probably put on a pallet. And then, that pallet's probably put on a truck, and the warehouse is really the road on the truck going to the distribution centers. I'm suspecting that that's where plastic is really getting its bad rap, because the bottled water has so many of the plastic chemicals in it, versus do I worry about this is sitting on my desk, it's a BPA free plastic bottle, a hard solid plastic that I use. It's a piece of tape on it so that everyone knows it's mine. But I'm not afraid to drink out of plastic. I mostly use glass, but realize that, there's wise use of plastic, and having a frozen natural beverage, chemical free, is a good use versus, bottled water, which is ridiculous to buy cheap plastic bottles that had been blown and filled.
What is exactly the harmful toxin or chemical that's seeping into the water in the plastic, and what is it? Do you know what it's doing to our body?
Yeah, I heard a statistic that there were actually 24, I don't know how true this is, 2,400 chemicals identified in the water coming from plastic bottles.
Jeez.
So I don't know how true that is. And I'm sure there are minute amounts, especially if there's that many chemicals. The concern, of course, is not that our body can't deal with a little bit of, toxic exposure. Our bodies are always detoxifying. The question is how much can they tolerate before it gets to be a problem?
Absolutely, yeah.
And, like we talked about with GMOs and, chlorinated water and artificial colors and flavors, those are chemicals. Drugs that people are taking, including antibiotics that'll kill off your gut flora. And the changes we're doing to the food, partial hydrogenation. Why are we hydrogenating things? One of the reasons is it makes it stay on the shelf longer, meaning the bugs don't want to eat it. Essentially, that's what that means. And there's a reason for that. They have more intelligence than the human beings that are actually making them. As we're changing the foods and adding all of these chemicals and putting preservatives in them, which are designed to kill, as we're putting these chemicals into the food more and more and more, our bodies, can only handle so much of this. I don't know what that limit is. I know that
Sure, it's different for everybody too.
Yeah. I'm choosing to search out real foods.
Absolutely. And Doc, you said something interesting on the last podcast too about meat, and even the grass-fed beef and meat isn't necessarily always 100% grass fed, which blew my mind because I had no idea. Can you just jump into that one more time?
Yeah, and if you go to your, you go to if you shop at Whole Foods or your grocery store, and you go to the butcher, they'll usually know, this grass-fed beef, is it 100%? They will know these things. They're supposed to know the sources. And I actually found this out. Well, first, I think I heard it from Jordan Rubin, but I verified it with a patient that came in, and she was, she raised cattle. And I asked her about grass-fed. Is it true? Because I'd heard this from Jordan Rubin. He's a very reputable source, but here's a firsthand farmer knowledge.
Someone's dealing with it. Yeah.
And she said, yes, we raise grass-fed cows, and they have to spend half their life in the field. So, we usually raise them for about 6 months in the fields, up to, I think she threw out 600 pounds, and said we then sell them, and the people that buy them will, fatten them for resale as grass-fed beef, but they're fattening them on grains, not on grass. And that's grass-fed because the animal was in the field for half of its life. Now, we look at that and say, okay, up to 600 pounds. First of all, how much of that is actually meat? And of that grass-fed meat that's on that animal already, how much of it is not going to be replaced as the animal is eating grains, fattening up to 12 or 1,300 pounds before it goes to slaughter.
Yeah. And by that point, it's like there's really no more grass-fed diet in that animal.
Right. And there is a definite difference between, grass-fed and grain-fed. Grains we know that are, inflammatory, high omega-6s versus, grass-fed going to be higher in omega-3s. So we want truly 100% grass-fed if you're going to consume animal foods. And, I told you I learned from Jordan Rubin. One of the things that I remember him saying, he said, you've heard it well said, you are what you eat. But I say, if you're eating animal foods, you are what they ate.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are what you eat, then they are what they ate, and then you're eating them. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, the one big difference I can tell from eating a grass-fed burger than a grain-fed burger is the grain-fed burger sits in your stomach. You get a little more fatigued afterwards, while the grass-fed 100%, you don't get that fatigue. It's not like bloating, and you can kind of go about your day almost immediately. Where the grain-fed, you're like you're down for the count for at least like half hour, an hour, where you just got to do nothing.
Yeah. I'm gonna believe you on that one. I don't remember because I don't know that I had a grain-fed burger in more than 25 years. But and that's about when years ago I started learning these things. We started following the Weston A. Price and being taught these things, and all of a sudden we had all these sources to, truly pastured. I even had my own chickens for the eggs in the backyard until the neighborhood dog jumped over the fence and ate them.
Yep.
But same thing when it comes to your eggs and your chickens. You look at the eggs and
the yolk is completely different.
Yeah. I remember the first time that we ran out of eggs, and I ran to the grocery store and I got the best organic eggs I could find. And I will never forget cracking them into the pan. First, the shell just almost broke in my hand before it hit the corner of the pan, because there's no calcium for these chickens or something. And this egg kind of, the yolk kind of like broke open, and it was this pale yellow color. And my kids went, "Ew, look at that." They had never seen a pale yellow yolk.
Yeah.
And remember, I bought the best. I read all the labels, bought the best organic pastured. Pasture just means that each chicken has its own square foot of pasture.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're eating wild and eating the plants and the grasses. They're sprinkling grains on the ground, but that's pastured. And I remember when they were eating them, I think I made scrambled eggs and they were eating them, and they're like, "Ew, these are disgusting," because they tasted empty. They were like fluffy, kind of tasteless, because there were hardly any nutrients in them. It's funny because it reminds me of a commercial where they said at, such and such a farms, we feed our hens a organic diet of, I think it was corn, soy, and marigold. Okay, corn, inflammatory. Not sure why the soy is in there. The marigold, we get that. That's so that, the yolks will be somewhat, and the meat will be somewhat dyed yellow, to make us think they're full of nutrients. You really have to know your source. And they, the commercial said a vegan diet of, now wait a second. I had chickens. They are not vegans.
Mm.
Yeah, they'll eat grass and they'll eat leaves and stuff like that. But for the most part, they're digging in the dirt looking for bugs.
Mm-hmm.
And in Florida, man, if they can find a lizard, look out.
Yeah.
It is on. I mean, that first one gets it and starts running because he knows the others are going to take it from him. And, they are not vegans.
Wow.
That's not the natural diet of the chicken.
Interesting.
Anyway, some things I learned in farming. What's the solution? If you're not a farmer, where do you get your food from?
Whole Foods.
Yeah. In the perimeter, shopping the perimeter, right?
Shopping the perimeter, yeah.
Yeah, and it's good to ask questions, and Whole Foods is neat because they do some, it will tell you this is locally sourced and stuff like that, and you trust that they're going to do some research and give you from farms that they checked out and they know they're using organic, chemical-free processes, and it might not be certified organic, but so I'm kind of trusting that they did some research in that. I'm in Florida where, we can grow food year round. We definitely grow a lot of food on our property. I remember when John Kohler from Growing Your Greens came to our home, and it was supposed to be about aloe vera. In fact, if you look up on his channel, I think it's the second most popular video on his YouTube channel with over 1 million views as
Really?
he tours our yard. And all the food that we were growing. So neat stuff. If the grocery store is closed, if we had a financial crisis in the United States, we would always have food in our yard that we could eat. And I think we should all be prepared that way. I'm in Florida. A hurricane can wipe out the area. When there's a threat of a hurricane, the stores get drained.
Mm-hmm.
There is no food left in about, a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if the roads got closed and they couldn't get fuel here and the stores couldn't reopen because they couldn't restock them. What would people do?
Not good.
You should be able to go outside and pick something off the tree or pull something out of the ground. Yeah.
Was it a big learning curve when you started planting your own vegetables and your own gardens and everything, or was it?
Well, yeah, I think the key to think about is what grows where I am. And then also from a food perspective, one of the most important nutrients, well, the three biggest nutrients are fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. So how can I get the most of those in the least space?
Mm-hmm.
And so where I am in Florida, there's certain things that grow very well. Some things that grow year round. Mangoes are nice, but this one tree, this big tree is going to take a big chunk of my property, and I'm only going to have mangoes for about 6 weeks. Now, I can get another mango tree that grows mangoes for 6 weeks, and it's a different 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That if I'm going to do that, it would be good to stagger them. So now I can have mangoes for 3 months. There's, one of the things that grow really good here are papayas. And papayas, they're huge. And if I have about 6 healthy papaya trees, I can pretty much harvest 1 whole papaya per day.
Wow.
Not taking up a lot of space on my property. And that's a lot of food. That's a big fruit salad that can be consumed by the family. Aloe vera, year round, I can harvest it 365 days out of the year. So, it's kind of I have a fig tree, which is nice, but, it's a very limited season. It's just one of those things where, okay, it's nice to eat figs that I grew out in the yard, but a limited season, not making a whole lot of fruit. So as you learn what grows, lots of herbs and spices, wow, they'll grow great, but that's not going to fill me up. That's not going to meet our needs, in a crisis situation. So that's kind of how I think. And things like, aloe vera and coconuts are hydration, also clean hydration if we had a water crisis of some kind. Coconuts are amazing. On our channel, our YouTube channel, I have a video on how to get coconut water out of the coconut in less than 10 seconds. Young coconuts, great hydration. Pop the cap off. You push it in an instrument that makes a hole in it, and you can dump the water out. And it literally takes about 10 seconds if you have a young coconut and you don't have to bust through the nut. Mm-hmm. These are great survival foods to grow when you're in Florida.
Right. I was going to say this is not growing in New Jersey, especially right now.
Yeah. So you have to figure out, this is where I am. What grows in my environment here that'll produce food year round?
Definitely. And it's all organic, no processed stuff, no pesticides, what the body needs.
Sort of, organic is one of those, again, it's one of those very loose terms. What does it mean to be organic? It means a certifying agency came out and inspected and made sure you're not, you're at least this far away from a neighboring farm that's using chemicals and stuff. They don't really consider what's in the air. The jets are spraying their fuel all over the place and stuff. If you live close to an airport, you'll see a film on the cars, if the planes are taking off and landing over your home. Acid rain is everywhere. Fukushima is still spewing radiation that's detectable in farmlands in the middle of the United States, because the radiation is spreading out everywhere. There's chemicals everywhere. In my city, although we grow organically, and this is one thing that really bothers me. We have a moringa tree. Moringa trees grow almost anywhere. Mm-hmm. You cannot eat them fast enough. My whole neighborhood couldn't keep up with my one moringa tree. But they attract a lot of bees, which are, wonderful creatures. If there's no bees, there's no food. Mm-hmm. We also have mosquitoes in Florida, and the city controls the mosquito population by spraying. I can't stand this, because although I'm growing organically, I know the city is being sprayed with mosquito repellent.
How are they spraying? Like planes coming?
No. It's funny. I remember in the late 70s, my first experience in Florida on the other coast, when I thought, wow, look at that big plane. I was like 11 years old, and big, flying low, and all of a sudden, we felt this like wet, cold mist hitting us as we were waiting at the bus stop. Here in my city, it's 2 or 3 in the morning. They wouldn't want it to be seen. They're hoping you're all sleeping and stuff. The truck goes around, you see the orange light blinking, which I think means don't be outside right now.
Run.
Yeah. And then the next day in my driveway, all the bees are dead under the moringa tree.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's, even if you try to grow organically, it's really impossible for anything that's actually organic to really be organic.
Now, the benefits of that for the government, just less bees, so they're not running around, and why are they doing that?
No, they're spraying for the mosquitoes.
The mosquitoes, okay.
But remember, people, these things work together. The mosquitoes, you want less mosquitoes, have more frogs or something. There's a balance in nature that happens, and I don't think we should be interfering with it quite that way. As you're spraying for mosquitoes, you're killing the bees, and when you kill the bees, you have no food. We need the bees.
Yes. And how do you feel about the planes? I can't remember the term right now. The chemtrails. Do you get those over by?
Oh, yes, we see them all the time. I still don't know what it means. I do remember growing up that those not the chemtrails, but the contrails disappeared. And every now and then, we'll see a plane making contrails and it disappears shortly behind the plane. But for the most part, we see these trails and they just stay up there.
They linger
forever.
there for, yeah.
I do not understand what that could be. I don't know enough about it, but I'm definitely concerned.
Yeah. Well, Doc, where can people find you online and your products and everything like that?
Definitely check out the YouTube channel, aloe.guru, to learn about aloe vera farming, to learn how to grow it yourself and the amazing things you can do with aloe vera. You can, if you have one nice, healthy plant, you can have 100 plants in a year. They multiply and divide amazingly. So aloe.guru. The website, aloe1.com, that's where you can get our raw frozen aloe. If you don't have the farming space to grow your own and you don't want to peel it and harvest the aloe gel like you see how I demonstrate on the YouTube channel, we do that for you. We harvest the leaves, we hand fillet them, we run it through a grinder to make it drinkable, and we run it through a chiller to get it cold real fast. It goes into the containers that go into the freezer. We keep it frozen until it leaves here. We box it up in temperature controlled packages that show up at your door, and we hope that they're still completely frozen when it gets there. It will be in the winter time.
Mine was
excellent. It's 100% raw frozen aloe vera gel, and you can melt it and drink it or use it in the products that you're manufacturing.
Absolutely. So Doc, thank you so much for coming on. Wealth of knowledge on so many things. We have your first podcast episode coming out on Monday. So if you want to learn more about the health benefits of aloe vera, gut health, and another superfoods, check out the episode coming out on Monday on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast listening platforms. And Doc, I'm sure you have plenty of other topics that we can cover in the near future. So I would love to have you on anytime.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pekka. Maybe put a link to our website in your description below this video once it's saved.
Yes, absolutely. There will be, we'll put all the links in the show notes, and we'll direct people to your channels, and very excited for it to come out.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.